What happens when your home goes into escrow? Well, it's a total mystery to out-of-state buyers and to sellers who haven't sold their homes in eons. So today I'm going to break down what to expect, how long it takes, and the paperwork you actually need. Plus, stick around until the end because brand new 2026 laws just completely changed the game. Hi, I'm Darlene Harwick, realtor for the resort cities here in the Coachella Valley. Okay, let's get into it. So let's start with the basics. What is escrow? Well, in California, escrow is a neutral third party. It's a licensed company that holds your funds, your documents, and your written instructions until every condition of the purchase contract is met. Think of escrow as the referee of the transaction. They don't take sides, they don't give out legal advice. They do follow the instructions that the seller and the lender have all agreed to in writing. Now, here's something that surprises a lot of people from other states. In California, we don't use attorneys to close real estate transactions the way they do in New York or Massachusetts. Here, the escrow company, your real estate agent, and your lender handle everything. That means your agent and your escrow officer are your quarterbacks. Choose them well. So, when people say a home closed, what they really mean is escrow funded the loan, recorded the deed with Riverside County, dispersed the money, and released the keys. That's the official finish line. So sellers and buyers, please get your paperwork to escrow immediately after they request it. If you drag your feet, the whole process gets bogged down and it'll take much longer to close. Now, let's walk through the timeline. And I want you to pay close attention here because this is where out-of-state buyers get caught off guard. Most financed purchases in Southern California close in about 30 to 45 days. Cash deals can close in 17 to 14 days if there's no complications. But in the Coachella Valley, I'll tell you right now, I'd build in a little extra cushion, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. So in the first few days, days 1 through 3, that's when escrow creates the opening package and receives the earnest money. Now, once a buyer's offer is accepted and both the buyers and the sellers sign the purchase agreement, the listing agent sends the contract to the escrow company. Escrow opens a file, assigns an escrow number, and sends out the first set of instructions. Escrow requests the buyers wire the earnest money deposit into the escrow trust account. Earnest money is generally 1 to 3% of the purchase price. That deposit gets applied to any closing costs at the end. And please hear me out on this. Your escrow company will never email you wiring instructions and state, oh, by the way, our bank account changed. If you ever get an email changing wire instructions, pick up the phone and call your escrow officer directly. Don't call the number in the email because wire fraud is real. All right, in the first 10 days, that's a busy time frame. The seller is required to provide the buyer a stack of disclosures their listing agent had already provided them. And those disclosures are the transfer disclosure statement, the seller property questionnaire, and the natural hazard disclosure. And if the property is in an HOA, which many Coachella Valley communities are, buyers receive a packet of CC&Rs, the rules, financials, and meeting minutes. Now, sellers, the transfer disclosure statement and property questionnaire is extremely important, and it's extremely important that you fill it out completely and honestly, because if you don't, lawsuits could follow you for years. So, meanwhile, the buyer agent is ordering inspections. There's the general home inspection, which is standard. But here in the desert, I always recommend a pool inspection if there's a pool, and there usually is, and an HVAC check. Desert summers are no joke. Without a functioning AC, you're looking at electric bills that'll make your eyes water. Now, the buyer pays the buyer pays for those inspections. And there's also the termite inspection, which is ordered and paid for by the seller. So from days 7 through 17 is the contingency time frame. The buyer agent and buyer reviews the inspection reports. These reports can read like a book. The home inspector documents everything he sees, from big stuff to minor cosmetic stuff. So after receiving the report, the buyer can request for any repairs, credits, negotiate the findings, or if something is a real deal breaker, can just cancel within this contingency period. But buyers, keep this in mind. Sellers are under no obligation to make repairs or issue credits. If there are issues the buyer wants addressed, now this is a time when both the buyer and the seller agents roll up their sleeves and negotiate an outcome in their client's best interests and also works for both parties. So days 10 through 25, that's when the home appraisal and underwriting kicks into gear, if the buyer is financing. The lender orders the appraisal. If the appraised value meets or exceeds the purchase price, underwriting continues. But if it comes in low, the buyer can renegotiate the price, make up the difference in cash, or if there's an appraisal contingency noted in the purchase agreement, the buyer can just walk away. Well, meanwhile, the lender is verifying the buyer's income, assets, insurance, and title conditions. Days 20 to 30 is typically the time frame to clear to close and sign loan docs. The buyer removes all the contingencies in writing, and the lender issues the clear to close. Now, the buyer will receive the closing disclosure at least 3 business days before they do sign the loan docs. Now, the seller doesn't receive the buyer's closing disclosure. Instead, the escrow officer provides the seller with a seller closing disclosure or seller settlement statement showing their exact net proceeds, prorated taxes, and commission fees. So in the last stretch, days 21 through 35, well, that's when funding, recording, and close the escrow happen. The lender wires funds to escrow. Escrow pays off the seller's mortgage, records the deed and mortgage, and disperses proceeds. Once recording confirms, buyers get the keys. That's the close of escrow. Now, if you're the seller, especially if you're selling a second home or an investment property here in the Valley, you have responsibilities too. And the clock starts the day escrow opens. Within the first 7 days, you should be prepared to deliver your transfer disclosure statement, your seller property questionnaire, and any and all disclosures about known defects, repairs, renovations, or issues with the property. If you live out of state and the property is a rental or a vacation home, you may not know every little thing, but you must disclose what you do know. And in California, the I didn't know is not a defense if you should have known. You'll also need to provide HOA documents if your property is in a HOA community. That means the CCNRs, the financials, the reserve study, the monthly minutes as well. Your escrow officer will request an HOA package, which can take anywhere from a few days to 2 weeks, depending upon the management company. Order it early. I've seen deals delayed by 2 weeks simply because the HOA packet took forever. So to be safe, I recommend you pay that little extra charge to fast track the documents. And if you have a mortgage on your property, escrow will request a payoff demand from your lender. That usually takes 5 to 7 business days. Make sure your lender responds promptly because a delayed payoff demand means a delayed close. And here's what I tell my sellers: the faster you return documents, the faster you get your money. It sounds simple, but I've seen sellers sit on disclosure forms for 10 days and then panic when the buyer threatens to cancel. Don't be that seller. Okay, before I get into the new laws for escrow in 2026, and trust me, there are some big ones. If you're finding this video helpful, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. It helps me know what topics matter most to you, and you won't miss my market updates. And if you're thinking of buying or selling here in my valley, well, you can just download my free relocation guide. The link is in below in the video description. Now let's talk about those new laws because they brought some significant changes that affect both buyers and sellers in escrow, especially here in the Coachella Valley, where so many transactions involve out-of-state buyers, second homes, and cash purchases through LLCs. Okay, there's the FinCEN reporting rule for all cash buyers. This is a big one for the Coachella Valley. If you're buying a residential property in an all-cash transaction and you, the buyer, is a legal entity like an LLC or a trust, the escrow or title company must now report the transaction to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. That's FinCEN, and it's a division of the U.S. Treasury. Well, what does that mean for you? It means if you're buying through an LLC or a trust, and many of my second home buyers do, expect to provide the legal names, the date of births, addresses, citizenship status, and taxpayer ID numbers for the individuals behind the entity. It adds a layer of documentation and a little bit more time to the escrow process. It doesn't change whether you can buy, but it does mean you need to have your entity paperwork organized and ready before you make an offer. And if you've been thinking about buying through an LLC for privacy or liability reasons, that's still a valid strategy. Just know that the recording requirements are stricter now. Talk to your attorney and your CPA before you start the escrow process, not after. Well, then there's the disclosure of digitally altered listing photos. This law requires that any real estate ad using AI-generated or digitally altered images must disclose the alteration right next to the image and provide a photo or a QR code to the original unedited photo. If listing photos have been virtually staged, that too must be disclosed, as well as accompanied with separate photos of the actual space. For buyers, well, this is a protection. For sellers, it just means your marketing materials need to comply. And for escrow, well, it really doesn't change the escrow process directly. But it does mean that what you see in the listing should match what you're buying. Now, there's the third-hand smoke disclosure law. Sellers must now disclose any known history of tobacco, nicotine, or smoking, and that's including vaping and e-cigarettes. This applies whenever a transfer disclosure statement is required. So, if the previous owner was a smoker, or if the property was used as a short-term rental where smoking occurred, that needs to be disclosed. Now, I know what you're thinking. Darlene, how would I even know? Here's the answer. If you know, you disclose. If you smell it, if your agent notices it during a walkthrough, or if a tenant mentions it, disclose it. The risk of not disclosing is far greater than the risk of over-disclosing. And then there's the HOA balcony inspection disclosure. So if you're buying in an HOA community with condos that have balconies, and many of our communities in the Valley have them, there's the HOA latest balcony inspection report, which now must be included in the standard HOA disclosure package. The report must include a summary page indicating whether there are any immediate safety threats. So for buyers in 55 plus communities or condo developments, this is something to review carefully during your contingency period. Just don't skim the HOA packet. Read the inspection report. And the final law, Cartwright Act and pricing algorithms. Now, this law prohibits the use of common pricing algorithms to restrain trade or alter pricing in real estate. For the average buyer or seller, you won't notice this directly in escrow, but it's part of a broader trend. California is paying closer attention to how properties are priced and marketed. Transparency is the direction we're heading. Now, let's talk about what makes the Coachella Valley different from the rest of Southern California. First, HOA documents take time. Our golf and resort communities have extensive CCNRs, architectural guidelines, and in some cases, short-term rental restrictions. And the HOA and document packages can take 2 weeks or more. So if you're in a 30-day escrow that eats up a big chunk of your timeline, order it early. Second, the natural hazard disclosure. Well, much of Riverside County falls within map zones for flood, earthquake fault, or fire hazard. Your NHD report will identify these designations. Review them because they affect the buyer's insurance requirements and property use. And then there's the Mello Roos. Some of the newer master planned communities in the Valley are in community facilities districts that levy a Mello Roos tax on top of your regular property taxes. This can be thousands of dollars a year. Your title report will show it. Don't get surprised at closing. And fourth is the desert inspections. That means pool inspections, irrigation, and HVAC systems can all show deferred maintenance in seasonal homes, especially if the property has been sitting empty through a summer. Now, termite inspections and pool inspections are not optional here. They're essential. So let's add this up. Escrow is not a black box. It's a step-by-step process with a clear timeline, clear deliverables, and clear deadlines. If you're a buyer, your job is to respond fast, return documents promptly, and stay in close contact with your lender and your agent. If you're a seller, your job is to disclose everything, deliver documents on time, and keep your HOA and payoff information flowing. So in 2026, the rules have shifted. FinCEN reporting for cash buyers through entities is now real. AI-altered listing photos must be disclosed. Third-hand smoke must be disclosed. Balcony inspection reports are now part of HOA packages. Now, these aren't scare tactics. They're actually protections, but they do mean you need a team that's paying attention. Escrow can be smooth, predictable, and even stress-free if you work with people who know the process, know the Valley, and know the laws. So hey, contact me if you're ready to start looking and start planning. And don't forget to download my free relocation guide. You're going to find it in the link below the video description. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.